Good evening again, and welcome to Hampstead Synagogue Online. And wherever you're watching this, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, and not Twitter, and perhaps we'll explain why later on, welcome to you. And if you do not know about the Hampstead Synagogue, let me explain that we are an Orthodox community based in London. We were founded in 1892 and normally reside in our cathedral-like city, Shul, in the one of the so-called cathedral synagogues in the United Kingdom. Our parent organization is the United Synagogue under the religious authority of the chief rabbi. And you join us for this series, Where Are We Now?, which looks at the COVID crisis and how the Jewish community has been impacted, and more particularly about looking at some of the issues that we'll be dealing with in the post-COVID world. I'd like to thank our media partners, the Jewish Chronicle, and you can find out about them and find out about news not only in the UK but around the world at thejc.com. This is the penultimate in the series, and later this evening we'll tell you what's going to be happening next week, our final, and also about a new series and a new media partner. So all that to come. Let me, if I may, introduce you to our panel. And we have a fantastic panel for you tonight, looking at the cultural space in the Jewish community and how we feel that's been faring up to now, and more particularly the plans for the future. So if I may introduce you first to Michael Etherton. Michael Etherton is Chief Executive of the UK Jewish Film. During his time at UK Jewish Film, he has been determined to increase the nationwide reach of the festival and its year-round program, touring to 21 towns and cities last year. He's also worked to support new creative talent through its Film Fund and Film Lab, and developed a new education through film program for young people, which is still running this summer through the pandemic. It's now the only festival of its type to be BAFTA qualifying. Michael is an all-round art specialist with a professional training in classical music. After 3 years of law at Balliol, Oxford, he studied cello in London and orchestral conducting at the Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance. He is founder and musical director of Mosaic Voices, a voice ensemble which has been broadcast on BBC Radio 3 and released its first album last year. He is also chairman of the Young Actors Theatre Islington. Now, if I can turn to Francis Jeans. Francis stepped up as interim director at the Jewish Museum London in April, right in the middle of the lockdown. Previous to this, Francis has been at the museum for over 7 years in the role of Director of Learning and Engagement. As part of this previous role, Francis embedded new partnerships across the Jewish community and heritage sector, including with Jamie, an organization we met earlier in the series, Bevis Marks, a synagogue, Wilston Jewish Cemetery, and St. Paul's Cathedral and Westminster Abbey. Focusing on sharing resources, Francis established the Faith and Heritage Learning Network and is also a group for education in museums London lead. Francis has pivoted the museum to a digital and virtual program during lockdown, with engagement numbers of 35,000 since lockdown began in March. She's also launched the museum sector leading virtual classrooms for schools and shared this digital expertise with over 350 museum professionals to help them set up their own digital programming for the next academic year and beyond. John Nathan, who is not with us at the moment, but we hope will be joining us later on, has written about and reviewed theatre for the JC, the Jewish Chronicle, for 15 years, and also writes features for The Times, The Independent, Evening Standard, and Metro, among others, including Prospect magazine. Much of his feature writing, especially for The Times, has been international, particularly where theatre has been responding to political and current events. And finally, Raymond Simonson. Raymond is the first CEO of JW3, London's Jewish Community Centre, the only one of its kind in the UK, and it opened in October 2013. He came into this role with over 25 years' experience in informal Jewish education, leadership development, youth work, and community building. He was the first full-time executive director of the global Jewish learning organization Limud. Prior to this, he was the UJIA Jewish Agency Director of Informal Jewish Education, where he spent a decade working with thousands of Jewish educators and youth leaders across the UK and in Israel. He is particularly proud to sit in a lay capacity on the advisory board of Amal, a new project of the Said Foundation that uses Muslim arts and culture to increase understanding of Britain's Muslim communities among people of other faiths and none. So that's all the time we've got tonight. We'll be back next week. No, it's a good panel, I'm sure you'll agree. So I just want to bring in Madeleine Abramson at this point. Now, Madeleine and myself are co-chairs of Hampstead Synagogue, and Madeleine and I will be sharing the hosting duties today. I think Madeleine, you had a bit of practice, didn't you, last time when we had to bring you in early when I lost connection once, didn't we? So you've had a little bit of a rehearsal.
And you're not allowed to lose connection tonight.
That goes to you as well. Okay, so hopefully everything will be fine as it is. Okay, so let's get things started. So who should I go to first? The technical people are worried; they don't know who I'm going to go to. Michael, just because you're on the top floor where I can see you, UK Jewish film cinema has greatly been impacted, closed down effectively over the last few months. Will it be coming back anytime soon? And how do you see the general picture, if I can use that pun?
Well, I'd have to say that I went back to the cinema for the first time since February. I went to Curzon Mayfair at the weekend, which was wonderful because it reminded me why the cinema experience is very, very special. I think we've all got so used to watching our TVs at home, and it's fantastic in a way that we've got that. But going to that cinema and sitting with everybody else and seeing this huge screen and just being enveloped by the whole film experience, it's completely different. And I remembered that I really miss it. But having said that, it's going to be quite a while before we are back in cinemas proper. I mean, at UK Jewish Film, we pivoted very, very quickly. We were quite lucky because we had developed a video on demand platform 3 years ago, and that was already up and running. And so when we got to the lockdown in March, we immediately moved all of our film program, which would have been at JW3 and Phoenix and up in Manchester and Glasgow. We moved it onto an online platform, and we've been developing audiences online and bringing in new content. And it's been, it's been great in a way because we have content that we would never normally have. So we're now we've just launched our second Israeli TV series called Unchained. Little advert, sorry, but it's really brilliant. And we also showed Autonomies, which was from the directors of Shtisel. So there's an opportunity there to do things that we wouldn't normally be able to do. So audiences have been big. We've had 40,000 people watching our films since the beginning of lockdown. So in a way that those figures are impressive. But I think people have missed going to the cinemas. We're preparing for the festival. The festival will go ahead. UK Jewish Film Festival will happen from the 5th to the 19th of November. But it's going to be very, very different. It's going to be largely an online film festival. I hope we'll have some screenings with our friends at JW3, but it will be for the main part online, and that's just where we are in the pandemic. People are fearful still going to the cinema, and we are aware of that. But for this year, there are a lot of things that we can do to take advantage of the opportunities that being in your home allow. And there's a lot of talent that we can bring. There's all kinds of ideas that we've got, all kinds of seeing behind the scenes at films, people that we'll bring in from the world of film to the screen. So we'll do the best we can to be really creative. That's been sort of what we've tried to do, be really innovative, very, very creative since the beginning of the lockdown, and keep doing what our job is, which is to provide audiences with fantastic films that look at Jewish life from around the world. We've just continued along the same path. The medium's different. We're sad about it, but we're still there delivering.
So it's finding this new reality and trying to do as best we can. I see it says Fran. And would you prefer to be called Fran?
Yeah, yep, Fran is good.
And did I pronounce your name correctly? I was a bit nervous about that.
Yes, you did, yeah.
Oh, good, okay. So I'll call you Fran now. Okay. Fran, obviously you have a fixed building, the Jewish Museum London, which is in Camden Town, a museum which I have been to a long time back, I should say, and it was absolutely fantastic to see that. And it took a long time to get the Jewish Museum there, because before that it was in a pretty hidden spot in Woburn House, I believe, in central London. So what do you do if you have a fixed building and you normally expect people to turn up to your building to see what you have on offer? What did you do in this situation?
Yeah, so we pivoted quite hard and quite quickly to digital programming. So my background actually comes from a digital space as well. So we had started moving a lot of our programming into sort of a virtual world over the last couple of years, really, launching various different aspects, including learning portals, online exhibitions, online collection searches. But of course, we had a digital engagement plan that was going to last us over the next 2 years. And like nearly everybody, our sector and beyond that had to move forward very quickly with that and pretty much do 2 years worth of work in the last 4 months. So we've definitely learned a lot along the way. I think it's interesting when we think about the physical space itself. Like our physical space is a huge benefit to us. We usually have around 50,000 people come through the physical space each year. But then on the plus side, we've engaged over 35,000 just through virtual events in the last 4 months. So we're definitely looking at where those boundaries are now. I think the other thing that we're very aware of is we talk a lot in the museum and heritage sector about the connection to artifacts and objects. But still, when you go into museum spaces, those things are behind glass. It's very rare that you are able to interact through touch with them. And using virtual world has been very interesting for us, because the first conversations we had were, how can we create sensory experiences? How can we create immersive experiences? But then when we looked at our programming in-house, we had to really have that conversation about, actually, is a lot of this very transferable? The learning programs are very different. They rely on very much like touch-based learning. So that was our main challenge. A physical space allows us a lot of context as well. You can move between objects, you can move between exhibits in a way that's much harder to do online. But the digital program has actually been a huge success for us, and we've made it part of our core programming, particularly the virtual classrooms that we launched for schools. Around 20,000 of our visitors are just school visits. So that was a massive audience for us. So we launched the virtual classrooms pretty much straight away. And that was a huge piece of work, but it's now core. Going forward, schools will have the option. They can either physically visit us, we go on outreach, but also they can book and have a virtual experience as well. And I think that blended experience is going to be really key for us over the next year, but actually I think well beyond that as well.
Thanks for that. And I think we're all doing the blended approach, really. There's no way we're going to ever go back to where we once were. And Raymond, I think for you, in a community centre where people meet and they form a community, it must be extremely challenging. But I know that you've been very active throughout this period, particularly on the social side of things and the welfare side of things. So perhaps you could explain what you've been doing over the last few months.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's great to share a platform with two organizations that constantly inspire me and that I love working with and partnering with. And I think what you're already hearing is that the cultural organizations in the Jewish community, you've heard that word pivot 2 or 3 times already. We've all pivoted really well. We don't normally stop and pat ourselves on the back because it feels a bit egotistical, but I think there should be a collective pat on the back, and I certainly applaud my friends and colleagues here for what they've done. Similar story to JW3. We have a physical building. It is a landmark building in the Jewish community. It is the most open, out loud, proud, labelled Jewish centre in the UK, in fact in the history of the UK, and it serves as a beacon to bringing people in from different parts of the Jewish community, bringing in Jews and non-Jews together, people that are old, young, really mixing people together. And the day we had to close our doors on March the 16th, we did it with a really heavy heart, but knowing full well that we had to put people's health and safety first. But within about 48 hours, we had, to go back to that word, pivoted, and become a virtual JCC, a virtual Jewish community centre. We focused on 3 key things. We had a kind of a 3-pronged strategy, if you like. The virtual JCC, all of our classes and courses, learning Hebrew, history, family activities, children activities, half-term, summer camps, moved it all online as quickly as we possibly could. And we're engaging with really significant numbers of people online, probably even more than I expected us to. That was one thing. The second thing was to create, we were thinking, what we miss by doing just that is the other part of JW3, which is the cross-communal hub. You know, we work in partnership with every kind of Jewish and even non-Jewish organization, and we bring different people together. It's a bit harder to do that in a meaningful way online and to give other organizations a platform. So my fantastic colleague Zoe created pretty much overnight, one weekend, Saturday night through till Sunday, created Jewish Online. And Jewish Online became a platform for Jewish organizations across the UK to share their events, to reach much wider audiences. So wherever you are in the UK, any Jewish organization or synagogue or cultural organization could share their online programming and reach much larger audiences. And that's had about 35,000 visits just to that page, just to that Jewish Online page, and that then goes to other people's organizations. And then the third prong, it goes back to what you mentioned, was the social action, tikkun olam, chesed, loving kindness, a core part of what JW3 does when the building's open. And when we closed the building, and like UK Jewish Film and like the Jewish Museum, we've never been closed during this period, right? None of us have been closed, we've been online. But when we closed the physical building, about a week after we closed, I had to come back to get some bits for my new home office in this little corner of a bedroom. And I stood there and I just saw this empty building. And I'll be honest with you, I genuinely welled up and had a bit of a sob at seeing this gorgeous resource. And it stands there as a Jewish resource for the Jewish community and the wider community. And it was heartbreaking to think that it stands there empty when it could be doing good. And we very quickly looked at what we could do to use the physical space, not just the online space. And we opened a food bank within a few weeks. We worked with Camden Council. We've worked with partners across Camden, non-Jewish organizations, refugee centers, homeless shelters, churches, and our incredible team of volunteers with just a couple of staff have, up until about a week ago, our volunteers had sorted, cooked, packed, delivered, distributed over 23,000 meals to people in need in the local community. And by doing that at the same time as having a virtual Jewish community centre with all the online programming and the bringing people together in a cross-communal hub, I feel incredibly proud of what we've done, but it's not enough. And it's not enough because, a bit like everyone else was saying, it is still second best to opening the building. Whatever else we say, whatever else I'm going to tell everyone about how wonderful it is what we're doing, it's a substitute for the real feeling of seeing the faces of people crossing through the doors of a cinema, of a museum, and engaging in real life. And so that blended approach that we're all going to be doing is about how much we can get people back, as well as taking the most of online.
Somebody's phone is ringing, so it's not for me. And so what I was going to say that we had a similar experience when we came back into shore to prepare it for services again. we know we're not asking our members to come back as normal because we just can't operate in the normal fashion.
Yeah.
But it was a very emotional thing for me to be back in the shul and just to see my colleagues in their preparation. I hadn't seen them for 3 months or so. They couldn't care less. It wouldn't. But I really felt really very emotional about seeing them again. Before I come to you, Madeline, because you're going to ask some quick questions, we just to remind everybody watching at home, if you want to send a message to us, please do so. And if it's in the form of a question, we hope to put that to our panelists later on. We're going to try to speed up the answers now so that we can have more of a discussion later on. But now over to you, Madeline.
Well, my question is really to all the panelists as to, you've talked about the blended future. And most of you have programmed up to the end of the year. I know JW3 is definitely closed for reality to the end of the year.
Sorry, Madeline.
Do you
just,
have
just to correct that? That's I'm not sure. There's a rumor that's gone round about that, which we've never said. Just to be very clear, we're currently running 5 weeks of summer camps that have already opened, and the building is full of 60, 70 children, which is fantastic, in their bubbles, all socially distanced. And from September, we will be bringing more and more activities back in. So from September to December, we have a phase reopening of in real life activity in the building. Sorry, just to clarify that.
Excellent. That answers my question. No, I had understood most of your events are virtual. So that's excellent news. That's exactly what I wanted to know. What about the museum, Fran? When do you envisage real events, or are you already open for real events?
So we're working on our phased reopening plan. Our major challenge, which I'm sure everyone is facing, is so much of our work is intergenerational. So trying to work out how to make sure that we're still ensuring the safety of everybody. So at the moment we're phasing reopening. At the moment we're open to staff. There are a couple of key volunteers who are coming in and helping. And we've also very tentatively sort of started allowing sort of researchers back into the building. So we sort of prioritize them. It helps us test some of the systems we have in place as well. We've been doing a lot of research across the sector. Some museums have started to open. So we are part of many networks finding out what's working for them. I went to my first museum visit this weekend as well, actually. I think a lot of people went out for their first cultural experience last weekend. I think the challenge we have at the moment is capacity within the building and working out via social distancing. Most museums are working at a 30% capacity in their building. And then we have to work out realistically when the best time to open is within that, with a careful watch on what autumn and winter is going to look like. We have been in a great deal of meetings with sort of government departments talking about what they expect autumn, winter to look like. And we are trying to sort of plan a museum phase reopening around that. We're going to be doing probably quite a similar approach to a lot of people in the sense that we'll probably open up to smaller groups first and bookable groups first, and then phase that in over a series of months, working up to a full opening. And we're going to be prioritizing certain audiences as well. So some of the audiences we've served through our wellbeing programs and our partnerships with mental health charities, some of the work for schools who sort of have been part of our core programming due to either being from spaces of sort of low engagement with culture and arts or high deprivation within the area. So we're going to be prioritizing audiences and making sure that those people who potentially were left behind via digital are caught through our first reopenings as well. And the best way we can do that is to keep it small to begin with and then work our way up.
Thank you. And Michael, you've talked about the film festival in November being partly real and presumably fully virtual as well. So have you got cinemas on board for November?
Well, we've already experimented really with going real, as you put it, again, and I possibly would contest that, but I know what you mean. But we've had our first drive-in event. We showed Yentl, if you weren't there, which was fantastic. And I know it's not the same as a cinema, but it's a fantastic experience, huge screen. You get, the sound is in the car, food comes to your car window. It was a pretty good experience, and we may do a few more of those over the summer. In terms of the festival, we're talking to all our main cinema partners, JW3, Picture House Curzon, and others. And it's an ongoing conversation. There is a lot of uncertainty. There is reduced capacity in cinemas, and so film festivals, much as they are loved by our partners, may get pushed further down the queue when it comes to providing capacity in cinemas. So that's one challenge we face, and the other challenge is simply, audiences. And it's all very well we program in cinemas, across London, and perhaps we can, but if audiences are actually not willing to go, and that may well be the case, then we do have to be careful about that. So there will be some physical events at the festival, but we will be guided partly by audiences and what they want and what they're prepared to do, and we will have to work very closely with our partners, and the position changes really every week.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry to use the word real. I think it's what you said earlier about the physicality of going into a cinema or going into a museum or of the community in JW3. And clearly that's what we're missing. The virtual programs have been amazing. But for me, watching a film on a laptop is definitely not the same experience. So look forward to the everything reopening, as we all are, but the virtual is fantastic. Over to you, Gabriel.
Thank you very much. Fran, if I may come to you, because I know that you have a little teaser for our viewers. I understand that you're going to show us an artifact from the museum. Can I go to you, and perhaps you could introduce?
Yes, of course. So Gabriel asked if I had anything in the collection that I thought could be a good sort of mystery object for the audience. I thought this one was interesting, and it's something I often use with groups, because I think it speaks for a few different things. So I'm just going to ask the tech team who are behind the scenes are just going to show you the image. I think we're just going to show it now, and then I think we're going to leave it open to the comment section if people want to have a think about what they think it is, and then we'll sort of reveal it right at the end. As you can see, the only information I'm going to give you is that it's very small. It's only 16 centimeters in height. So I know there are quite a few people in the audience who are very knowledgeable about Judaica. So if you get it, you will be the first time I've ever shown this to an audience and someone got the answer. So there will be bonus points for anyone who does get it. But have a little look there, and then we'll talk about it right at the end, I think.
Thanks very much for that. And that proves that we can bring the museum online, really.
Absolutely.
So I think that's quite fascinating. Now, I'm going to ask a more general question now, because it's something that I think is quite interesting, and that is the Black Lives Matter movement, a real event that happened in America, which is impacting on the arts and cultural space. We're looking back at our back catalogues and archives and kind of expunging slave owners. And I just wondered, are we comfortable with this? Is it because that the arts sector perhaps is quite, I'm going to be controversial here. I'm going to say, if the arts sector is quite weak at the moment, is it more susceptible to being pushed into a particular position? So I'm going to just wonder where your position is. For example, in the Jewish Museum. Oh, sorry, Remy, did you want to come in? That's fine.
No. Okay. Look, I think we as a Jewish community are a community that is rooted in core values. And when another community is going through such a horrific time as it's hard to say the Black community, because like the Jewish community, there are many communities, but Black people are scared and are frightened. I talk to people a lot, and the Black Lives Matter movement wasn't triggered by one event. It's come to this big head at the moment, and we as a Jewish community that includes many Black British Jews, a voice that isn't heard anywhere near enough. I think we have to stand together and be part of that. And we can use arts and culture and education and all the tools that we have at our disposal, films, discussions, exhibitions, but we absolutely have to be part of that. And it's just become a little bit more complicated in the last few days, because unfortunately, because of this outburst from this grime star, Wiley, who is Black and British, it gave unfortunately, some people in the Jewish community are kind of an excuse to go, well, we wash our hands of Black Lives Matter, or see, I told you they were all against us, and I'm disturbed and upset and outraged by that, because now is not the time to turn our back on other people where we can stand up, as we know from our sources do not stand idly by. So yeah, I think at the moment we should be doing even more, and I was pleased to see the Jewish Museum just doing something at the moment around that as well.
But I have a slightly different question about the impact it's having on our archive, our cultural archive. Fran, would there be, if there was an artifact in the Jewish Museum which had a connotation with a slave owner 100 or 50 years ago, would there be a demand to take that off the shelf?
It's a great question. So we have been running Black History programs for many years. It's something I started maybe 5 years ago. We've had several members of staff who have developed tours, schools programs, all sorts of things based on the collection. So we actually have a few items in the collection that relate to this. In fact, I'll show you one. Actually, the tech team have got one there. If you show slide 2, John, that'd be great. So this object that's just about to appear is one of my well, it's actually the object I nearly always start with at the museum. I think it is absolutely fascinating. It's incredibly rare as well. It's one of the only Jewish examples of a memento mori. For anyone who is thrilled by the idea of Christian Judea art, then I will talk about it at length, separate to this. But what this does is this is a jumping point. So we use all the objects as jumping into like contemporary discussions. And this is a jumping point into the Dutch involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. So it's from about 1681, and the slave trade obviously started in the sort of 16th century and went through all the way through to the 19th century. So you can see here on the right-hand side, what is represented as a small black man or boy, depending on the sort of interpretation, because of how artists depicted people of social class. It's not always easy to tell if it's depicting a man or a younger person. But we use this object as a way to discuss the involvement of the Jewish community in that aspect. It's not the only thing we touch on by any means. We also have an exhibition about the Abidjan, Ugandan, community. And I think what's our approach, the museum, is very much education. We need the objects in order to springboard into conversations. I think what's important and what museums are really thinking about now is the language we use, the way we interpret those objects. There was a lot of talk about tearing down statues and bringing them into spaces, but there's no point just putting them in our spaces. They need to be talked about. They need to be interpreted. They can't just exist as they did in the public space, in our public spaces as museums. I think there is sometimes a call for not displaying things. And I think those are conversations to have with the community they are supposed to be representing. I've done a lot of work with disability organizations as well. And sometimes objects are not to be shown. And I think back to when we had the Jews, Money, Myth exhibition, and how much conversation we had around some of those objects. You know, is it right? Is it ethical that we show some of those things? Once an image is displayed to the world, it can be used in any means. And that's something that we have to think about all the time as well. We don't have power over those images once they're released. But our approach is very much about using the objects as springboards for discussion. And I do believe that.
Well, I'm going to come to film now, if I may. Thank you for that, Brad. When I watch old films, I like seeing the terrible stereotypes and the things that we're quite mean about today, because I think it's important to learn where we're coming from. And if we start saying that we can't see them, I think that's missing something. What do you have anything to say, Michael, on Gone with the Wind? Because that was taken off some of platforms. Should we take them off, or should we put context on and put it in the menu context, put notes on, for example?
No, I don't think we should be censoring films like Gone with the Wind. But I think we can contextualize it, and that's what we try to do normally at the UK Jewish Film Festival. If there is a film which, for whatever reason, is difficult, and there are many challenging films that we do bring as part of the festival, we will always run a discussion. We will contextualize it. We'll allow space to debate. So I really don't agree at all with the idea that we start throwing away our cultural heritage in which, and it's not just Gone with the Wind, it's many other films, TV series that we could talk about, but we might want to contextualize it. Look, I think it's given Black Lives Matter has given all of us in the cultural firmament sort of renewed energy in a way. I mean, certainly for UK Jewish film, we've always wanted to reflect the diversity of the Jewish community, and I don't think that people, even the Jewish community itself, doesn't always know how diverse it is, and that's why, for example, we commissioned our short film 100 Faces 2 years ago, which shows 100 different British Jews saying what it means to them to be Jewish, saying or singing about what it means to them to be Jewish. And the amazing thing about that film is there are Orthodox Jews and secular, there are Black, there are Asian Jews, Oriental, gay, straight, trans. The range, the diversity of our community needs to be, it's important that people know that. That's part of fighting stereotypes, which is part of what we need to do at UK Jewish Film, and culturally in the community. We need to fight the regular stereotypes about it, all Jewish people being, I guess, wealthy, white and middle class. The community is much more complicated and much more diverse than that. And it's important that we speak up and we explain that to the wider community, and that we're also aware of it ourselves. And it includes, a small but significant number of Black Jews who are really far too invisible, but should be more visible.
I think also it's an impact on the theatre. Before lockdown, what I was noticing is that male roles were being played by women, and Black actors and actresses were being playing white parts of the historic context. So they were trying to bring up more opportunities for actors across the board. But there's something problematic about that, and I don't want to go into this too much. But Frank, can I just bring you in a minute, because we have a guest on the item. We think Hannah Jacobs, from Finchley, I believe, says, "Is it a Havdalah set?"
Do you want the answer now,
well,
or do you want?
You can tell us if it's a Havdalah set.
Well, that is what I will say is you're not wrong, but you're not right.
Ooh.
It's so getting warmer, I would say. Yeah.
Oh, that's intriguing. Okay, Madeline, perhaps you would like to ask some questions. You will have to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted. What about your financial situations? Are you all surviving? You've had no income through the doors. I'm not aware that you're charging much for virtual events. The museum is clearly shut. Fran, are you surviving?
Yes, first. So yeah, I mean, finances, I think, across the arts and cultural and heritage sector is a huge concern for everybody. I think it was 98% of museums and cultural spaces worldwide closed down, and there are concerns about many of them. I've been working very hard with my team in a few different ways, fundraising the money we need, and also looking very carefully about our operational costs. And I think whilst we're sort of confident as we go into this next year, which is a great place to be, at the same time, we are very aware that every time we change the plan, there are increased costs that come with that, i.e. the phased reopening plan is a huge consideration for us. Some of our events have been income generating, so that has been a huge help to us. The other huge help to us are things like our membership program, which is like for a lot of cultural spaces, a good way to not only engage with our sort of audiences, but to have that steady revenue, which keeps us going in that way. I think it is the major concern. I think there has been a lot of community help. I think there's also been a lot of, from our side, museum sector help as well. But I think the concern that's on the horizon is not so much about this year, but what the fundraising environment will look like a year from now, 2 years from now. So I think that's probably where our thought process is now going.
The government has announced that it's investing £1.5 billion. Are any of your organisations eligible for that? Or is that the large art spaces and the provincial art spaces?
Yes, I mean, I'll start, I suppose. So the announcement has come. What we haven't got is any detail on that as yet. So whilst I'm sure we're all very hopeful that we will be eligible, as yet, no information to tell us where that funding is going and to what percentage across the range of arts and cultural spaces. Arts and culture and heritage is an extremely broad spectrum.
Forgive me, Madeline, but John's come into the room, and I know his time with us is very short. John, we've given all the introductions to you at the beginning, so thank you for joining us.
Not at all. Thank you for having me, and I'm very sorry, everyone, to come late and leave early. It's not my choice, and it's not because my time is more valuable than anyone else's. It's just that my deadlines are circling.
And the readers need your printed word.
I don't know whether they need it, but they're going to get it.
Right, and I hope we're going to get the spoken word now. John, perhaps more globally, we know that the theatre industry has been very much impacted, and it's probably going to be the last to come out of the hibernation, as it were. What is your understanding about the current situation for the UK theatres and the Jewish connections as well?
Well, as far as theatre is concerned, the situation, I think, can really only be described as bleak. That's not to say that we're staring at the end of theatre, because theatre will always find a way. But this, to coin what's increasingly an unprecedented, what's becoming a cliche, these are unprecedented times. And it's very difficult to see, I think, despite the optimistic plans that are being put in place by the likes of Andrew Lloyd Webber, it's very difficult to see really how the ecology can return to the way it was this side of a vaccine. Cinemas need only about 20% capacity to operate in some form. Most theatres need about 80% to be sustainable, and those figures can be played with when it comes to subsidised theatre. Commercial theatre is going to find that much harder. So there are positives that one if one looks at hard enough, one can find. This era has resulted in what could be described as new kinds of theatre. People are using Zoom and online methods of projecting theatre into homes, but the extent to which this will affect people's habits in terms of how they consume theatre is not understood yet, and it's not clear if people can be given the confidence to go back into theatres, the extent to which they're going to feel that they're that they want to. It's a case of new habits might die hard rather than old habits being revived.
Yeah, and there is one good news, I think, that the open air theatre in Regent's Park is opening, and the Jewish character in that production, Jesus Christ Superstar. So that's a slither of good news. But what about
Praise be.
But what about Jewish productions that were in the pipeline? Where are they now? I mean,
Jewish productions are in the same pickle as non-Jewish productions, but I was in fact just, sorry to drop a name, but this is one of the pieces I've got to write. I was just talking in fact, I'm just wondering whether I can say this. I'm going to say it anyway.
Nobody's watching, don't worry.
Okay, but there's the production of Arthur Schnitzler's the adaptation of The Doctor, which was pulled. Juliet Stevenson was returning to the West End, was about to, when, like many other productions, it was pulled. And the thinking is that that might be able to return in April. I know that Nika Burns is hoping Leopoldstadt, Tom Stoppard's play, will return at some point as well. The truth is, nobody is prepared to put a date on these things because nobody knows. But certainly the intention is there.
And is it economic to not have an audience but film straight to cinema?
That may be an option. I mean, certainly that's a method that's been used before, but the loss is about that's a variation on what we're doing now, which is looking at a screen. The theatre is about being sharing the same space, not only as an audience, as your fellow audience members, but in the same space as the performers. And I don't think that that is in any way going to be can be a replacement for going to the theatre and sitting in the seats. Andrew Lloyd Webber apparently says that if people are going on planes, they will go back to the theatre, and there may be something in that. And we need optimists like him looking at how it might be possible. But sitting on a plane, you're sitting next to one or two people. You're surrounded by many more people in a theatre, and I don't want to be, the naysayer for any of these projects, which hopefully will find a way to allow us back into the stalls. But it's hard to think that we are going to be able to step back into the ecology, as I said, until there's a vaccine that allows us to sit around each other without masks and commune as audience members need to with what's going on in front of them.
Thank you. Madeline's now going to ask you a really upbeat and optimistic question.
Oh, good.
Well, I am, because it's after what you've said, John. We've had a question in that says, if you had a message for people right now who might be feeling cautious about returning to the physical spaces that you're in, what could you say to them to try and get them in? Because people vary very much. I'm optimistic. I'm happy to be out there, but a lot of people are not.
It's a very good point. And in fact, the playwright James Graham made the point, I think, that, most of the tickets that are sold for theatre, at least at the full price, are sold to over 50s. And it's they who are going to feel most vulnerable. It's that demographic who have a right to feel most fearful. I think, though, you can put a lot of faith in the efforts by people like Nika Burns, and who have been testing ways in which people can be safely allowed back into the stalls. These methods are not just being written on the back of an envelope and put into place to get people in. They are being tested. There's a lot of money being thrown at that. And there is a real determination to, despite what I've said about the culture not being, me not being able to see how the culture can return in the way it was without a vaccine, there is a huge amount of effort and skill and determination to make places safe. And so I would be optimistic for that reason. I think it will be possible. Even now, the Donmar is about to put it, is finding a way of getting audiences back in with a piece called Blindness that's going start with Juliet Stevenson narrating, as it happens, and albeit as it's mainly a sound installation, but there's still people will be in a theatre building.
I think we've got about 10 minutes or so left. So I thought what we could do now is reflect on how we think this particular era is going to be reflected within the cultural sector in the future. How will the museums educate people about what we've been through? How is theatre going to commemorate it, and cinema as well? So, Fran, and Raymond also, how is the JWA going to look when people go back to it is another question. Fran, earlier on in the evening, we showed an artifact, okay? The closest we've got from people guessing by the looks of it is it might be the whole Havdalah set inside it, or maybe a part of it. Can you put us out of our misery and tell us now what it is?
Yeah, I'll ask the tech team just to bring up, if we bring up slide 6.
So it is a full Shabbat set,
I'll just show you.
then Kiddush cup, candle holders, and spice box.
So the answer is yes and no. So I use this object because it is a great one to talk about expectations and the role of like authenticity within museums spaces. So that's the full object. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see what happens when we start pulling this object apart a little bit. So if we click through, so you can see it forms into many different pieces. And then the next slide again shows you built up. So what you've got is several different pieces. So absolutely, for the people who are guessing, you're right. Some people have noticed quite a few things within that. So the Kiddush cup is slightly more noticeable. The Havdalah tower there as well, there's spice tower. But it's also got all these extra sort of functions as being a Shabbat candle holder, Hanukkah lamp, and there's even a Megillah that you can see on the left-hand corner there. The reason I love this object is it gets people thinking about like sort of the multi sort of purpose aspect of it. But the question we always say is like, why would somebody create such an object? It's very, very small. And the answer becomes clearer the closer you look at it. And we use it very much for talking about this idea of authenticity and the space that museums in particular have when it comes to artifacts and objects. This object is completely fake. It's a forgery. It's what we would call fake news, I suppose, nowadays. It's something that was very popular to do around this sort of time, was to create fake objects to sell to what was really quite a high demand market, looking for objects that represented the hidden Jews in Spain. So people would create these materials and then sell them to collectors in the hope of convincing them. It's obvious the more you look at it, the spice tower actually has no way, no door, no window to put spices into it. There is a Hebrew inscription on it, which of course, if you're trying to hide Jewish objects would be a terrible idea. So there are lots of clues as you look into it, but we often use this, particularly with young people, talking about really that idea of it's not just where you get your information and what you're looking for. It's about questioning everything you see, questioning who it comes from, the interpretation you have around it, the context of it, and not just believing something because you think you're in a space with authority. And that's really important. We do this with a few objects in the museums. Some things are fakes and forgeries and some things are real. And I think it's a really important thing that we do, particularly with young people. Social media, I mean, and look at the situation of the last weekend, you know, this reliance on certain places to get our information is very dangerous. So looking towards sort of cultural and heritage institutions to look for like real information and that space for dialogue on it is so important. So yes, it's a Marmite object because some people will hate that answer, obviously, but it's something I use all the time.
So just for the out-of-towners, hidden Jews were Jews who couldn't live outwardly in Spain in the times of the Inquisition.
Yes.
So, okay. We haven't got time to go into all those different elements, by the way, and explain what they're all for, but they're mainly for festivals throughout the year. I'm going to give you a rest, Fran, so you can think about how we're going to commemorate this particular era in museums in the future. But Raymond, how are we going to, what would we experience at JW3 if we were to go there now? I understand that Zest is not going to be operating, am I right?
Correct. Like everyone else, we have to try and protect both the people, that's the staff, the volunteers, and the visitors to JW3. So I can certainly assure people, to go back to the previous question, that we're taking everything bit by bit, slowly, with risk assessments and PPE and health and safety and cleaning regimes like you cannot imagine. Nobody is going to go into our building without us being confident that it is as COVID secure as it can be. And that means very reduced audience sizes, but it also means that our income is significantly down. This year, our latest projection is that we will have lost about £1.5 million of income this year due to COVID, which is very, very difficult to stomach. And so we're having to make decisions at the moment to protect the finances of the organisation in order to ensure that the charitable activities can be maximised. So yes, for now the restaurant, cafe, catering facilities, Zest, which was always ours, we ran it ourselves and employed the staff. We've had to close that. That sadly means there's 22 people that have had to be made redundant. It was fine being able to maximise the furlough scheme, but that comes to an end, and so that's really sad for everyone, hardworking people. But these are the tough decisions that all organisations are going to have to make. At the moment, we have to put all of our energies and efforts into ensuring we open safely, and that's what's going to come first. So you will see a growth of activities. We will keep activities online where we believe that demographic is safest to stay away for now, and where it's working online. There is a huge demand from all the surveys we've done for entertainment and family activities. Those are the two things people are looking to us mostly for. So to bring back live music, live comedy, family activities, we're already planning for Hanukkah activities, all these kind of things where people want to come into a building, and we will only work with the maximum numbers that we can have, following all of the government's guidelines and going a little bit further than that.
Thank you for that. So that's very reassuring, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
In fact, all the institutions here. Michael, how do you think that, first of all, film is in a backlog, isn't it? A lot of films have not been released and are not likely to be released for many, many months. Will the big screen eventually depict this particular era?
Yes, I think so. But it's film. It's going to take a while to feed through. So I think there'll be some interesting stories set in lockdown, inspired by lockdown. That's going to take a while. I think, hopefully, our own Pairs short film fund, we commission 2 new short films each year, and the next we've got 2 which are actually just about to go into filming in the next 2 weeks. But hopefully in January we will find something related to lockdown and commission that for 2021. But I guess that the film is in a sort of crisis, in the sense that there's great material that we're all watching, consuming now on our TVs. It's fantastic, but there's very, very little film production going on. It's only the big studios that are able to get their productions going, that they can afford the kind of insurance that is required to greenlight productions at the moment. All the independent films are stuck, except very, very small films like our own short film fund films. So although we've got a really fantastic program this year, a wonderful, wonderful film program, which we're very, very excited to bring in November, but I'm a little bit worried about what we will do in 2021, because there will be a lot less material around, depending on how long the crisis goes on. But there are very, very few films being made next year, so that will become apparent. It's too early to tell. But this year it's all great, and I think people have really, culture has got a lot of us through the worst of lockdown. Art, literature, film, music has been so important, and we've all been really, really determined to bring that to audiences. But we also need your help as the community and our audiences, to make sure that all of our cultural organizations, all the ones here and there, others as well, in 2021 will still be robust. We are quite vulnerable at the moment. We are working hard. We're bringing you as much as we can. You've heard a little bit tonight, but we really do need the support of audiences to get through this and to be strong, and so that we have a strong cultural sector in 2021, 22 and beyond. And I think that's what we've all got our eye on.
I'm going to ask a similar question to John in a second, but it's been quite fascinating watching Coronation Street, which is the #1 soap opera on television for the out-of-towners. And they haven't realised that there's been any problem at all until this week. And they've caught up with reality, and they've hit it with a sledgehammer. So it's gone from one extreme to the other. It's quite funny. John, obviously the entire industry has just shut down. There's been no rehearsal. There's been nothing. So how long and how quickly can the industry get it back on its feet?
Well, there is a tradition of what's called rapid response theatre. Writers are interested in responding to the world around them, and as quickly as possible. The Black Lives Matter movement is already being written about by writers such as Roy Williams. There's no doubt this is going to be a huge subject for writers to tackle, but it'll be a huge challenge as well. A bit like global warming, there was a period in which plays sort of just appeared when it became the zeitgeisty subject to write about, and a lot of them were bad, and one or two were good. So, one of the challenges will be quality control. But I think what will be necessary for theatre to do is a kind of dual purpose for the theatre going public, and one will be to reflect the experience that we've all been going through, and the other will be to offer escape from it. And it's going to be very important for artistic directors to work out how best to do those two things. But there's no doubt, classic works will suddenly find themselves having a new significance, a new interpretation. There'll be all sorts of fascinating things to happen. Look, I'll end on an optimistic note. Theatre will not die. People will find a way to make theatre. So let's stick with that. I was going to say, I'm not going to do the but.
I'd like to say that in Shakespeare's time, the theatres were closed for the plague, and yet theatre has definitely survived, and Shakespeare's work certainly has. Raymond, I think
something? Michael made such an important point. John's built on it, and I just want to say the same, which is to everyone. I know you get huge audiences. Everybody who really cares about the importance of arts and culture and how it can transform lives, and the impact of the Jewish arts and cultural sector, which is a really fragile bit of the community at the best of times. Now's the time really to support it. Now's the time to be making sure that when UK Jewish Film Festival launch, book as many films as you can. If you watch it in the comfort of your own home, if you can come to JW3 or wherever else, please do so. Make sure you check out those exhibitions at the Jewish Museum. Make sure that you look at what the Jewish Music Institute and Jewish Book Week are doing. And I want to say the words of Sir Nicholas Sirota, who is now the chair of the Arts Council. But when he was the director of the Tate, he wrote something which has been sort of at the forefront of my mind in recent weeks, which is experience of arts and culture can shape all of our lives. Through culture, we encounter the values and imaginations of others, past and present. Creativity is one of the essential ingredients of a rich and tolerant society of personal and national identity. So as far as I'm concerned, what we do in the world of arts and culture, in theatre, in film, in museum, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. It enriches our lives. And if we don't all engage with it and get to grips with that now, then we're going to have a huge problem down the line. So everyone at home watching, just get engaged with Jewish arts and culture at the moment.
Thank you very much for Raymond. We got a message in from Aviva, who said that she's going to bring her school back to the Jewish museums, Fran, so that's good news. When they come back to the museum, whenever they do, will there be artifacts in the future about this particular time?
I certainly expect so. I think
we probably will be the artifacts.
Well, some of us don't. Oh, yeah. I think what I want to see more from the museum is this sort of talking about the lived experience of the Jewish community generally, and then I think this is a perfect example of that. I think there museums, like John was saying, we have a similar program called Rapid Response Collecting, which is collecting due to an event that's happening in society. And we have been talking about that as well, and we certainly will. I think for us, we've not gone straight into that. I think what we're thinking about is actually like the role that the museum has, particularly with our learning provision, is about not just collecting things, but actually helping people process events. We have obviously through so much of our other work, we work a lot with audiences about through trauma or through difficult situations and processing that and talking to young people about that as well. And I think there's a huge amount of that work that needs to be done. And I would like the museum to have a role within that, not just with collecting things, but with helping people process what happened, talk about what happened, so that as other people come into the space, there's this dialogue between people. So I think when we're thinking about like what our response is going to be, it's going to be a lot like that. And I think connecting back to people is really going to be at the heart of everything we do going forward.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to have to wrap up, but I do know, Fran, that there is an initiative of putting things on loan, isn't there? Can you just give us a quick word about that?
Yeah, of course. So some people have seen it. I think it was the full page of the back of the JC, which was excellent. We've very generously been awarded some funding via a museum sector funding called Esme Fairbairn. And this project is the beginning of this sort of new idea for us about how we connect back to the Jewish community. And what I want to see is sort of like emotional connection back to our objects. Like the objects that we store are people's personal lives. They are stories about, amazing things that happened and also everyday things that happened in our community. So the idea of the project is we have got over 40,000 objects in the museum and only 5% on display. So whilst there will be a great many deal of objects that can't go out due to their nature, their fragility, there are also a great number of objects which were designed to be used, that could be used and could connect us back to our heritage. So we're compiling basically a sort of a lending library of those objects, and those objects will be available for community spaces and even people to bring into their homes. So the idea is, imagine a Hanukkah where rather than using the Hanukkah lamps that potentially we've bought over the years, instead you loan one from the museum that's connected in some way to your own personal family history. That might be from a place your family migrated from, or a story that it connects to. And you can use that instead, either as a community space or in your home. So again, it comes back to this, like Raymond was saying, like our core values, like what do we exist to be here for? And for me, it's about emotionally connecting people back to our heritage, like really looking at why we've decided these objects are important for us to store, why they're important to safeguard, and like how we bring those back to the community so they don't sit in store, they're back out there. So that's going to be the first of that sort of project, working out ways that we can do that.
Fantastic. So thank you to everybody, and also to KC, 80s Boy, and Sandy Miller, who are watching. Thank you for your comments. And now, if I may, I'm going to hand over to Madeline.
Well, I'm just going to thank our panelists very much for participating tonight. I hope our audience has enjoyed it. I certainly got a lot out of it, understanding where we are going to be, and your enthusiasm is catching. We will support you, and I hope that's true of everybody who's watching. Thank you to our media partners, the JC, our technical team for tonight, and Gabriel Herman, for putting this whole program together. And just to tell you about the next and final Where Are We Now in our series, which is next Thursday, the 6th of August at 8 o'clock again. And this time it will feature two top journalists, Jennifer Lipman and Miriam Shaviv. And I'm going to hand back to Gabriel, because although Where Are We Now is finishing, there is going to be another program. Gabriel.
Thank you very much. Yes, so this is going to be the August of the missing holiday. And so we're going to try to recreate a holiday for you. Hampstead is going to be visiting 3 countries, each on a Sunday morning. These will be live events from 11 o'clock London time. That's 5 minutes past 11 Hampstead's time. And on Sunday, the 9th of August, we're going to be visiting Australia. On Sunday, the 16th of August, we're going to be visiting Israel. And on Sunday, the 23rd of August, we're going to be visiting India. So that's going to be very interesting and fascinating. So that's another new series coming up in August with our new media partners. I'm going to whisper this because we're on this platform, and that's going to be the Jewish News. So that's something to look forward to in August. I think that's it. I'd like to thank everybody for watching, everybody behind the scenes, and thank you for watching again. Ladies and gentlemen, good night.